Okay, welcome to week two. So a couple of things I wanted to highlight for your attention. First of all is in the announcement section. It seems that a number of folks are not watching the announcements. You definitely have to watch the announcements for items. So specifically, I've seen messages saying I can't complete my assignment because I don't have a sample.txt. I can't get into the sample.txt. Well, that was something that we were having some access problems for certain students, and we posted a announcement on that. So again, pay attention to the announcements. If you take this file right here and you download this, you can save this file, and then you can use this for your file. Now again, for this sample.txt, it doesn't really matter what file you use for that section. The actual call itself, you could load any file that you want as the sample.txt and it can still work. I provide you with one just to give you an example. Now, other folks have had some trouble downloading the introduction material. So in each of the weekly assignments, you've got an introduction script that I run through in the video. Some people have had difficulty getting access to those. So I included another announcement with all of those zip files right here. If you download that zip file, it has everything in it for you to use. A third final option for you is if you go to my GitHub, out there on the GitHub under the introduction to R, all of these files are also stored. I'll also note that sample.txt is also out there. So feel free to use any one of these paths in order to get your sample files and your weekly introductions. Now the second thing I want to talk about is office hours. So we have office hours. Again, if you look at the course calendar, you're going to see office hours are Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now the timing of these is because we also simultaneously have a number of folks, including myself, are in the Data 742 class. So Data 742 has its office hours starting at 7 on Tuesday, so that's where you've got the offset of 1 hour. Now, if you happen to be one of those students that's in the 742 and you ask me questions in the 742 office hours, I'm of course going to field those questions too as well. I do record these. The students who attend those, I will send out the message back to them. This is an opportunity if you're having trouble with your script, if you're having trouble with some of the content, you want to come there and ask me a couple of questions. That's really what it's all designed for. So office hours again, 8 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Thursdays. And if you need a time outside of that, reach out to me in email and we can talk through that. Another announcement which we had, the very first thing that we had was the collaboration room. There's actually two 710 classes running this semester, and so I had to make a shared collaboration room. So you should always be using this link that was posted in that first announcement. If you just go into the class, if you just go into Course Tools, Blackboard, and you go into the course, you may or may not, depending on which class you're in, you may or may not get into the right one. However, if you use this link right here, which was sent out on the announcements, then it'll allow you to go right in and you'll get access to it. We did have a couple of students on the last office hours went into the wrong room, and then we had some confusion trying to find out where they're at. So make sure you use the link. There's the office hours. There's the sample files. That should kind of tidy up all of the questions which had come through related to the course itself and some of the actions on the course. Now let's talk about week two and the expectations for week two. Let me go ahead and pull up R here for you. So here are the questions, and I've actually just included it inside of an R script. I'll run through a couple of things with the R script too as well, just to make sure that these are all clear. These were also posted, in the initial pilot, the introduction videos. You'll see some of this material is repetitive. So as you're going to submit your weekly assignment or work on your weekly assignment, here's what you should do. Start here, choose New File, and choose R Script. That will give you a blank R script in which to write your code. The four panes, which really we're going to pay attention to here, is this is your code pane in the upper left-hand corner. The bottom right-hand corner is your console pane. Bottom left-hand corner, sorry. The upper right-hand corner is the environment pane. It's also got the history. It's also got data connections if you've made any data connections, and a tutorial. Okay? And in the lower right-hand corner, this is where you've got the files, which is primarily what's going to be of interest to us. Any plots that you make during the session. packages, and you can also do the install and the update of packages from right here. It's got the help file. It's got the viewer, so as we load data, you can actually see viewer, and it's got a presentation tab as well. Okay? Primarily, you're going to stay in this files section right here. So, let me go ahead and close this out. Here's my new script right here. So the very first thing I would want to do in my script is I would want to have, some kind of a header like this. So I would have, this is the class I'm in, this is the week that I'm in, and this is my name. Have some variation of this. You should start in your script. I also have put my GitHub repository in there just for your reference. Let me go ahead and copy this. So I'm starting my week 2. This is the first thing that I would do. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what that first question is. Here's the first question that we're going to have. And I would put some kind of an indicator here that I'm going to be working on the first question. Why is that? Because if you happen to get an answer that's close, if I know this is kind of the item that you're giving that's going to line up to question 1, well, then I can grade it and I can offer you suggestions. If you just put in R commands and that's all, if you get anything wrong with those R commands, or it really isn't clear for me where that particular command, that response, ties back to the original question, then you're not going to get credit for the question. It's that simple. Adding comments along the way, this is best practices. This is something which I expect, and this is something that the course will expect out of your script. Now, again, I'm writing up in the code pane, as you can possibly see. If I needed to execute something immediately, I can execute that down here in the console pane. So if I was going to install a package, for instance, that would install the Quantita package, for example. So I'm not going to typically use the console section unless I'm just trying to execute a command or I want to get a value. So let's say that I have a value for something called dat up here. If I wanted to see what's in dat, I could just type dat, and I can see there's the value that's stored inside of that variable. Okay, so that's used just, again, interactively to interact with R, but that's not where you would type your code. And you definitely wouldn't just take a screenshot down here of the console of a couple of commands that you put into it and expect to get any kind of points related to it. Excuse me. Okay, so then let's start down talking with the questions right here. So this is the first question right here. It's include basic statistics and make 2 vectors, x and y. It doesn't really matter what you put in the vectors. Here's an example of making 2 vectors. And we had this in the introduction video too as well. So then what you would do is you would enter your commands right here. So what would you do for mean, median, standard deviation? You put in the commands right here. You type those commands out. When you are done, you would then turn around and save the script. When you save the script, that's the file that you want to upload to us for grading. That's the file which we will use to actually grade it. So the first question, this is one that you're going to enter in the commands. That's one type of question that we're going to have in the course. Second question here is to create a time predictor. Now that sounds kind of scary, but really what this is about is, can you read the R function that's been created here for you? This function is in the book. In the book, it walks you through the entire function. So you should read that section of the book, you should read that section of that reading, and then come back to this here, and for each of these lines, you'll want to add a comment. So in other words, here's some examples of that. So right here, this first one right here, we're just going ahead and creating a vector A, and by creating the vector of A, it's going to be 1s and 0s. Because again, this said a discrete valued time series. It's a binary discrete value. So it only has 2 values. In this case, 1, 0, 1 and 0, 1 and 0. And so this is just a random string of 1s and 0s that we're going to use for this first vector. And we're going to try to predict the 4th element of that vector. So that's what the A and B goes to. Now that's going to be free. That's 2 of the items that you have to identify as part of this exercise. Then you'd go down through each one of these and you'd leave a comment. So after the end of this, you'd put the pound sign and then you'd write the comment, what is that line doing? And you'd go through every single one of these lines and then make sure that you have comments for all of these. Without those comments, you will not get any points for this particular question. So it's very important that you add those comments. Third question is to create a simple recode of data within a vector. Again, this comes from the reading. You should find examples. You would enter your commands in here. Fourth one is to create an R function to generate a covariance matrix. There's actually three different ways of actually doing this one. There's the one that you can use the example out of the book, and that here you see here. That exercise is, again, take this and you add a comment saying what each of those lines are doing. There's another way that you can do it using a library command. So if you load that library and you happen to find that in the help, if you're looking around and you find an example, and you choose to use that example, then by all means, it can kind of be done in 2 or 3 statements. You can have the exact same thing. If you do it that way, you don't have to go and you have to comment. But if you turn in a version that is like this, and it does not have the comments after it, again, you will get no points for that particular question. The next thing is a function to identify outliers. Here again, you have a choice. Some students have wrote their own function. Some students have chose to do the add a comments saying what each line is doing. If you choose to write your own function, I would recommend comments, but you don't have to. As long as the function is doing the appropriate thing, everything is good. If you choose to use the one that's from the book, you have to identify what each of those individual sections are doing. What is it doing here? What is it doing here? Why is it doing it? And in this particular case, you can see it's a nested function. So why is it doing that nested function? There's a big key reason why it's doing that in this particular example. So I've seen, again, 3 or 4 or 5 different ways of solving for this particular question. If you write your own, comments are recommended but not mandatory. If you use this example, you have to put the comments in. And then finally, again, let's just create another one, create another matrix, and then use another, run it through again just to verify again for a second check that this is working. That's the assignment for week 2. Before anybody would ask, no, I'm not going to type this out and give this particular item to you. This is something that you can type out yourself. You can also rewatch this video and you can see the individual lines. You can type that out yourself. So for an introductory script, I'm happy to provide those, and that's what's in the zip file, but I'm not going to provide you with this to do the homework for you. I'd like you to go ahead and type those in for yourself. And I do appreciate the students who have already kind of submitted to this point and have done a good job in that space. So again, create a new file. Within your new file, go ahead and type in your commands. You type in all the things. When you get done, you do a file save and save this as an R file. So this would be like week 2. And when you save that file right there, that's the file that you'll actually submit to me. Now there's one final thing I want you to do before you submit your stuff. You got to make sure that it's working, okay? So right now, I can see just visually here, I can see that my R has a whole bunch of data. It has some values that's already stored. So if I come in here and I make an error in one of my scripts, and then I turn around and save it, I submit it, the first thing I do is I go to grade it. I'm going to look down and it's going to have an error. And you're going to think, what happened? Because it was working. Well, it may have been working because you had the function stored correctly over here, but when you save the final version of it, it did not. You did not save it correctly. So I always ask to do a clean sweep just to make sure that everything is working, okay? So let me go ahead and create an example here. Let me see if I can find something that I could use to... Let's just misspell return on that time predictor, for instance. Okay, so right now if I run time predictor, it's going to work. But if I rerun this, and then try to run it, it's going to give me an error. So the first thing I want to do is I want to do cleans. So right here, you see there's a little broom. Go ahead and hit that broom. Now it's cleaned out your console. If you've done a plot, hit the little broom right there, and it'll remove the plots. In your environment up here, hit that little broom right there, and it'll erase the environment. Then what you do is you run a clean run of this entire thing. So I'm going to run this entire thing right here. And then I look down here in my console. I see no red right here, so I know that it ran. And so now I can save this. I can submit this. I know that this is a clean file, so I want to go ahead and submit this particular file. So please go through that final step. The very first thing I'm going to do when I pull up your work is I'm going to run this. Now, if it is a week that we have something where we're loading a file, I'm going to put in that working directory that I did in that first initial week's demo strip. I'll put the working directory to make sure it's pointing to my working directory and my sample files. So that's about the only other thing that I'll do code-wise for looking at it. But in this case here, let's say that time predictor was wrong. I'll go ahead and try to repeat that process again. Okay, now if I try to run this, we see that time predictor is giving us an error, right? So I know that there's something wrong with it. So if I got this script in, the student says, yes, it's good, but they accidentally made a mistake. They accidentally fat-fingered it whenever they were saving their file out. You're going to get points taken off because there's the error. Something small like that, probably not many points I would take off, maybe a point for just something simple like that. But again, I would ask you to clean your scripts, make sure your scripts are good before you submit. So one more time, clean here. There's no plots, clean here. Run the entire script. Let me make sure I grab the entire script. There we go. And boom, we got a good check. Okay, so that covers office hours. That covers the announcements. Please, please, please pay attention to the announcements. That covers the introductory scripts. That covers the sample.txt questions which people were having. And it covers week 2, what's expected out of the homework. If you have any questions from this, please feel free to respond back on the discussion board, individual email, show up to office hours, and I'll be able to help you with questions in those spaces too as well. Okay? Have a good week, and I do appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.